The Sharks Were Hungry, written by Dorothy Cartwell. Dr. John Perry decided it was time to go home. It had been a perfect day. A day alone, the first such day in many years. He had filled his bag with all sorts of seashells, enough to study for a month. The island had been a good place to find shells. But now the sun was going down. He must leave before it got dark. He picked up his bag of shells and walked towards the edge of the island. He came to the sand reef that led from the island to shore. He stopped for a moment to enjoy the sunset on the ocean water, then began to walk down the sand reef towards the shore. He walked slowly, stopping a few times to rest. He began to whistle. Along with nature all day, it had cheered him. He could see the shore. The gray color of evening was beginning to spread across the ocean and the sand. He hurried on. Then, suddenly, he stepped into the water. Before he knew what had happened, he dropped down and down. The water was covering his head. He rose to the top of the water, blowing and struggling to get back onto the dry sand. He felt the water rushing about him. Somehow he got onto the sand and sat down wet, and surprised at his sudden fall. He heard the water still rushing about, and then he saw a long gray shark. He stood up, looked around. He saw the sharks swim towards the shore, and then he saw other sharks. 5, 6, 7 of them. But where was the reef? But what had happened to it? He began to walk backward on the island, while he had searched for shells on the island. The strong ocean waves had washed a large part of the sand reef away. There was nothing between him and the shore but water and sharks. He did not know much about sharks, but he was a good swimmer. He looked at the shore, which was now almost black against the red sky. He could swim, but what about sharks? Do they attack in the night? He tried to remember what he had read about sharks. Didn't sharks find their food by smelling it? If they did, it meant they looked for food at all times, even during the night. He decided not to swim to shore. It was too dark, and he wanted to see the enemy if he was to fight it. He looked around for his bag of shells and found it a few meters away. He put the bag onto some dry sand, then sat next to it. The wind was warm. The stars began to show. The moon rose. The water looked peaceful and quiet and yellow in the moonlight. The gentle noises of night soon made him sleep, but not for long. Most of the night he lay down and looked up at the stars, thinking. He thought of the people in the village, his friends. They needed him. He was their doctor, the only doctor in the village, and it felt good to be needed. He thought of the sharks. Would they go away during the night? Then he thought of food. He was hungry, but hunger was his smallest problem. The ocean was filled with fish. If he could catch one, fish would satisfy both his hunger and thirst. But hunger and thirst could wait. At last he thought of sleep. It came at last, and he slept until the sun rose. He felt stiff when he got up. He moved about. Then he looked at the water before him. It was clear and green. Far off, he could see the noise of splashing was made by the sharks. He saw red areas on the water, and he knew the sharks were killing and eating the fish. The sharks were there because the fish were there. The fish waves that had washed the sand reef away had somehow pushed large schools of fish into the area. He watched the sharks kill. They swam after a school of fish. played with them and killed them even though they were not hungry. They would not let fish swim out into the open area. He looked at the sea. If he swam to shore, he would be in the water 5 or 6 minutes. Much could happen in that time. A wind blew across the water. Small waves rushed across the top and stopped him from seeing the bottom. He hoped the wind would stop. Somehow, clear water seemed less dangerous. He looked at the sharks now near the shore. They were still feeding. It was hard to think of himself being attacked by a shark. A man, when he's healthy, feels good. But pain, a torn belly, a missing leg, a badly crushed head by those powerful teeth. No. He wanted to live. To swim now might mean sudden death. But the sharks might stay here for days, a week or more. He decided to swim. But first he looked all around. There was not a sign of a boat anywhere. No fisherman, nothing. He looked up. Not a sign of a storm, just a clear blue sky. He took off all his clothes and kept only his belt and his small knife. The sharks were far off. He silently slipped into the water. He went deep down and looked around. He was about to rise to the top when he saw a long gray body below him. Small dots of sunlight danced on his body down through the clear water. He kicked himself up to the top and struggled onto the sand. If he had not looked down, he would now be halfway across with the shark chasing after him. He did not think of the rest. He took up and looked around again. How could he make the sharks move out to sea? If he swam out to sea, he could jump in and get to the shore before they saw him. He saw the sharks rolling and playing. Their hunger was now gone, and they were killing for fun. How could he make them move? He put his knife from his belt. Sharks can smell blood, he thought. He put his knife against his leg and cut deep into the flesh. The blood ran out, and he caught it on his white shirt. When the shirt was red and wet, he tied some cloths around his leg to stop the flow of blood. He tied a long piece of cloth to his shirt, then walked to the edge of the sand. He threw the shirt into the water and put it with the piece of cloth. The shark smelled the blood and came racing towards the shirt. He ran down the sand reef pulling the shirt, and the sharks raced after it. He was leading them away from the shore. Suddenly he dropped the cloth, turned towards the shore, and ran as fast as he could. He jumped in the water and swam. He was halfway across when he turned to look back. A high bony fin was cutting through the water toward him. He put his face in the water and kicked and splashed himself forward as fast as he could. The shore was near now, but he thought of his belly under the water, how defenseless it was, and he thought of the flat nose of the shark hating from below. He lifted his head again to breathe, and he saw the shore very near. From behind, he felt the water rush toward him, almost pushing him, helping him. He kicked and shouted as loud as he could, and then a great gray body hit him and almost rolled him over in the water. He touched the shore with his fingers, and he put himself up the stones. The shark, excited by the smell of blood and its chase, went after him. Its great body crashed against the stones. It rolled and turned as it dropped back into the water. And then the other sharks jumped on it. The end came quickly, and the water was covered with shark's blood. The injured shark was eaten alive as it tried to escape. Dr. Perry slowly got to his feet. So, he said, you did not get me. And he looked down at the sharks still eating, even though they were full of food. He climbed up the stone and walked towards the village.